Hi everyone, welcome to today's coffee chat and thank you for joining us for our second coffee chat of the spring 2021 season. I'm very happy to have Ted Bovey, Abby Hodges, and Ellie Bold here to talk about boosting child engagement through classroom schedules and routines. So before we begin, I just have a few things to cover. First, I have a few webinar tips for your webinar watching experience today. So if you have any applications open, such as email or other web browsers, if you close those, that can help increase bandwidth and improve your viewing experience. If you have any questions during the webinar, there is a questions tab in the webinar panel, and you can enter your questions there, and then we'll be doing a Q&A session at the end where we'll be answering some of those questions. And if you'd like to minimize the webinar panel, there's a little orange arrow at the top of your webinar panel, and that'll minimize it. And then if you'd like to expand the panel to change audio settings or enter questions, you can click that orange arrow and that'll expand the panel. And if you are experiencing any audio issues during the webinar, you can switch to the phone option in the audio tab, and you can use that to dial in and get audio through your phone. Or you can also try and exit out of the webinar and join back in, and that'll usually alleviate any audio issues. So Ted, Abby, and Ellie are chapter authors of Unpacking the Pyramid Model, a practical guide for preschool teachers. The Unpacking the Pyramid Model was created by pyramid model developers and experts, and this is the first book to provide a comprehensive step-by-step overview of the pyramid model for children ages 2 to 5. So if you'd like to find more information about that, you can go to bpub.fyi/unpacking-pm, and there will also be a link in your follow-up email tomorrow that'll link you to that book. Today we are also doing a book giveaway. So one attendee will be chosen at random, and they will be sent a free copy of Unpacking the Pyramid Model. So you'll be notified after the webinar. Just submit your questions to increase your chances of winning a copy of Unpacking the Pyramid Model. And last but not least, certificates of attendance are available for all webinar and recording viewers, and I'll be providing a little bit more information about how to access those certificates later in the webinar. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenters. Ted Bovey has been working with children with autism and other developmental disabilities and their families in both inclusive early childhood classrooms and in the home setting for over 25 years. Ted has extensive experience training preschool teams working with children with autism and parents of young children with disabilities. Ted is also an original contributor to the development of the Pyramid Model preschool training modules. Ellie Bold is a doctoral student in the Child, Family, and School Psychology program at the University of Denver, and she's a graduate research assistant in the University of Denver's Positive Early Learning Experience Center. Prior to her start at the University of Denver, Ellie spent several years working at the Duke Center for Child and Family Policy, supporting implementation and evaluation of multiple community-based programs. And Abby Hodges is a doctoral student in the Child, Family, and School Psychology program at the University of Denver as well, and is also a graduate research assistant at the Positive Early Learning Experiences Center at the University of Denver. And Abby assists with a number of projects, including research and assistance with the implementation of the LEAP model, Pyramid Model, and the Prevent, Teach, Reinforce for Young Children model. So without further ado, Ted, Abby, and Ellie, thank you so much for joining us.
All right, there's my first online faux pas already. I forgot to unmic myself. Thank you, Dan, and welcome everybody. We are very glad to be with you today from Denver, Colorado, where things are nice right now, but we have what could be an epic storm scheduled for the weekend. So could be measuring snow in feet in our front lawns in just a few days. As Dan said, we are contributing authors in this amazing, amazing book, Unpacking the Pyramid Model, which is really designed for pyramid model implementers to get a little more information and in-depth knowledge about how to make the pyramid model work for you in your classroom environments, wherever they might be. We are going to talk specifically about designing schedules and classroom routines, and share some of the information, obviously, in this chapter with you today. So with that being said, I think we'll jump right in. One of the things that, as Dan said, we've been I've been doing this work around inclusion and supporting young children in inclusive settings for over 20 years now. And I've been involved with the pyramid model work since the pyramid model's inception in the early 2000s. And one of the things that we have really learned is a really important kind of foundation of the classroom is child engagement. And what we mean by engagement is that the kids are appropriately and contextually doing what they should be doing in the classroom. So engagement during center time is different from what engagement during large group time looks like, and that's different from what engagement during a snack time or a meal looks like. You have to think of it in terms of what's going on in the classroom and it being contextual. So one of the things that we've learned is that if we work really hard to promote child engagement, then that opens up lots and lots of opportunities for children to learn. And so you can almost think about it as an inverse equation. If engagement levels are really high, challenging behaviors in a classroom tend to be really low. If engagement levels are low in the classroom, oftentimes you see challenging behaviors that are at a really high frequency rate in that classroom. Because you can't be doing those same things at the same time. You can't be engaged in contextually appropriate behavior and inappropriate behavior at the same time. So we've spent a lot of time looking at strategies to help support kids' engagement in the classroom. And as I said, it has become something that we really focus heavily on because it is a powerful predictor of children's developmental growth. Because when they're engaged, they're ready to learn. There are opportunities for learning that you as an instructor, a teacher, a teacher's assistant can then capitalize on in the classroom. So part of this is thinking about what kids are doing throughout their day and establishing systems in your classroom that are going to help kids understand and be able to independently answer these 4 really important questions. We as adults, some children of all different ages, learn to use strategies naturally within their day to answer these questions. You know, we know how to tell time. We have our Outlook calendar, or a day planner. You know, classrooms have daily schedules, and all of those things are put in place to help kids answer these 4 questions, because when we can process this information, it helps us to monitor our own behavior. And so it becomes kind of a self-monitoring strategy because I know what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And I know and can track that I'm making progress with this activity. And there's something that's going to help me know when I'm finished, and something that's going to help tell me what I'm supposed to be doing next. So as we look at the classroom and we look at what kids are doing, we're asking ourselves these questions throughout the day. What kinds of systems does this classroom have in place that's helping kids answer these questions? And so one really great example of that is how you develop and design your daily schedule, right? We develop a daily schedule. It's hopefully consistent and predictable, and follows the same kind of sequence every day. We support that. You know, a big pyramid model strategy is to have your daily schedule visually represented in the classroom, and to frequently throughout your day reference that schedule so that we're checking in with kids again to help them understand and answer these 4 questions. But one of the things that we've learned as we've done a lot of work with children with developmental disabilities, and especially doing this in inclusive early childhood settings, is that just having that kind of one level of a schedule of your big daily events isn't enough. So we started thinking about how we could break this down even further and how we could use the ideas around a daily schedule within all of the things that we do every day. And so we started to develop this idea of creating what we call routines within routines within routines, or shorthand, routines to the 3rd power, routines times routines times routines. So routines to the 3rd power. And here are these 3 levels of routines. The first level is our daily events. These are the big things. These are the things that you have on your daily schedule in the classroom, right? We want to make sure that those events of our day are balanced. And when we talk about balance, we talk about balance between adult-directed activities and child-directed activities. We talk about balance between active activities and more passive activities. And we talk about balance between large group activities and smaller group or individual activities. And actually in the Pyramid Model book on page 54, we actually have, 51, we have an example of a tool that we use with classrooms to help classrooms kind of look at their schedule and look at that balance of the day. And so that's a resource that is in this book and available to you. And obviously there are instructions of how to do that. But the goal is to establish that first level of routine, which is your daily events, and to develop that in a way that's consistent and predictable and has balance, right? So then we look at the next level of routine, routines to the 2nd power, or routines within routines. And these are the activities that take place. So these are the specific and consistent components that make up an event. So an event would be arrival time, and your activities would be the things that happen during that arrival time. The kids say goodbye to their parents, they go to their cubby, they hang up their coat and backpack, maybe they have to get out a snack, right? Then they go wash their hands, maybe then they go find an activity, a table activity or a floor activity. Maybe you have a question of the day that happens during this time. There could be many things that happen that are all part of this arrival activity, right? Or this arrival event. So these are those activities. And then the 3rd level of routine is the specific steps that have to happen associated with each of those activities. So as I said, kids come in, they say goodbye to their parents. So how does that work? Does the parent say goodbye first? Does the child respond? What kinds of materials do we have to help a child respond? Then they go to their cubby and they have to hang up their coat and backpack. What's the process for hanging up their coat and backpack? Well, they probably have to take their backpack off first, then they take their coat off, then they hang their backpack up, then they hang their coat off. Oh, but wait, if they have to take their snack out, they got to do that before they hang their backpack up. So we really get into thinking about those incremental steps that happen within each of those activities. Your question of the day, what does that look like? What's the process, right? And the reason that this is important, and Abby and Ellie will get into this in more detail, is because it's at this level of routines or routines to the 3rd power that instruction happens. Instruction doesn't happen at the level of arrival time. Instruction happens at the level of unzipping your backpack to take out your snack, right? And so this helps us as adults think about where kids are, what they're capable of doing, and how we need to provide our instruction. And it also helps us as the adults in the classroom think about, okay, I need to remember what these steps are. So this is an infographic that was developed by Brooks to go along with this chapter, and it really outlines these 3 levels of routine. So we have our routine to the first level, or the first power, which are our events, those big events of the day: arrival, centers or playtime, snack, morning meeting, outside time, right? Routines to the second level, or the second power, routine squared, which is our activities. So our activities happen within the events. And then routines to the third power, which is our routine within a routine within a routine. So our routine within the activity within the event. So it can be a little challenging to get all this language, this jargon straight. And I frequently find myself mixing up the terms, but setting these up and thinking about them in terms of events, activities, and routines is really helpful in terms of processing that information. So we have a couple of examples that we can share with you. And this first one, as I already kind of introduced, is arrival time. So you can see that arrival falls under that event column. And within arrival time, kids go to their cubby. After they go to their cubby, they wash their hands. After they wash their hands, they pick a center, or maybe it's a table activity to go to. And while they're playing at those activities in this particular classroom, question of the day happens. And also there's a sign-in routine. So those are additional activities that are happening within this time that we call our arrival time. And then you can see in the third column, the routine within the routine within the routine. So when kids go to their cubby, they need to take off, obviously, their coat and backpack. They need to hang up their coat, unzip their backpack, take out their snack, put it in the snack bin, zip up their backpack, and then hang their backpack up in their cubby. It's a lot of steps there, right? But that's where our instruction happens. Then they go to wash hands. Obviously, they have to transition across the classroom. They get to the sink, they turn on the water, they get soap, they wash their hands, they rinse their hands, turn off the water, they get a towel, they dry their hands and throw the towel away, right? Again, lots of steps there for kids to engage in, but that's where the instruction happens. Then kids pick a table or a center to go to, so they go and they find their play pass, they go to their area and they hang their play pass up in that area. And then at some point, a child's gonna come over to them and tap them on the shoulder and tell them it's their turn to sign in and do question of the day. So they accept their ticket, their name from the peer, they go to the sign in, they sign in. Question of the day might be right there too, so they answer the question of the day, and then they have to pick a peer and go get that next kid. So all of this instruction is embedded within this routines, within routines, within routines. And again, being consistent and predictable with these what was the word I was gonna say? With these routines, helps kids answer those 4 questions. What am I supposed to be doing right now? How do I know I'm making progress? How do I know when I'm finished? And what comes next? And again, Abby and Ellie are going to get into talking a little bit more about how we provide instruction around these things and what kinds of supports we put in place. But just to wrap up my little bit, here's another example. So this was a classroom's opening circle routine. So they've come to the carpet area, they've sat down on their spots or in their chairs, and the first thing they do is a welcome song where the adult selects a helper, the helper gets the prop or the materials, the helper passes out those materials, the teacher provides a prompt to the kids for their prop or their hands to come up, they sing their song, the adult picks another helper, that helper goes around and collects the prop. So a lot of instruction embedded within that. It's clear to kids what the expectations are, what the answers to those 4 questions are, and then they go on to the next activity, a child choice song. Then they go on to the next activity, a social skills lesson, and so on. So that's a little introduction to this idea of routines within routines within routines. And again, the ultimate goal here is to increase children's engagement with these routines, which opens them up for opportunities for learning. By having these consistent routines to the third power in place, it's also our opportunity to provide support and assistance. And again, it's where instruction happens in the classroom. Instruction doesn't happen at the level of opening circle or welcome song. It happens at the level of prompting a child to do the hand motions, right? All right, so I am gonna turn it over now to Abby, and she is going to continue on. Abby, you can just tell me when you wanna change slides.
It's Ellie next.
Where is it, Ellie?
So I'll hand it right over to Ellie.
Oh, sorry, it's Ellie.
Join us at the end. No worries.
All right. So thank you, Ted, for starting us off and walking us through what routines to the third level means. And next, the question is, how do we do this in the classroom? So teaching children the routines comes down to the 3 areas shown here, which we're going to explore further in the subsequent slides. And it's through instruction, visual supports, and reinforcement that children can learn their routines and begin to operate pretty independently in the classroom, which is a really cool part of this type of instruction. And one thing to note before we start, I just wanted to highlight how consistency really is the key in this process and being able to implement these strategies. As Ted was saying before, just as adults do better with the schedule and working knowledge of what our expectations are, the same applies for the children in our classrooms. And we can go to the next one. So step 1 is instruction around the routine. And yes, the ideal time to teach children the routine is in the moment while engaging in it. And to do so effectively, it's important to know what the children in your classroom can and can't do independently, which is knowing the kids in your classroom generally, and then being able to work with them. So what they can and cannot do, but then to adapt instruction in order to meet them where they're at. So some children may only need verbal instructions paired with the visuals that we'll talk about next and be able to jump right in and engage in these routines on their own. Others might need some more support, and that might look like physical prompting, physical directions, breaking down the steps even further, or a peer buddy to practice with is a personal favorite of ours. That zone of proximal development is a term that I'm sure is familiar to you all, and that is exactly where we implement this instruction, meeting children where they're at, and as they've mastered each step, guiding them up to the next one when they're ready, and being able to work with them to practice that next one with support, and then slowly fading off that support as they're demonstrating that they're able to do it independently. And next slide, we have step 2 of visual supports. And so visual supports are an extremely important part of teaching children these routines and routines within routines within routines, because they serve as guiding lights. And so we're going to break visual supports down into these 3 areas shown here. classroom-wide visual supports, activity-specific visual supports, and routines to the third power visual supports. And so first we have classroom-wide visuals. So establishing and maintaining that consistent routine within the classroom is essential to the successful functioning of a classroom environment. And consistent routines support children's independence because they know what's expected, participation because they know what they're supposed to do, and their learning because we can embed goals and promote learning at the next level. And as Ted was sharing before, that's where that instruction happens. So classroom-wide visual supports are available, as stated in the name, to the whole class. And that visual schedule of the day is a great example of a classroom-wide visual support, which is shown here. And it allows children to track their progress throughout the day, knowing what's coming next and therefore what they should be doing and what has already happened. And it guides them in their behavior of what should I be doing right now? And as Ted noted before, the classroom visual schedule should be utilized beyond just having it present in the classroom and posted up there for children to look at. It's important to be referencing it throughout the day and engaging children in tracking their progress throughout the day to keep them oriented to where they're at within the schedule. So a couple examples, either uncovering what's coming next in the schedule as everyone's sitting in circle time, or sometimes taking off what's already completed, all done, and dropping it into a little bucket. And these are things that the children can do themselves in terms of engaging them in that process. Where are we at? What did we just do? What are we doing next? And having children come up and help in the classroom to update the schedule. And then it's, again, helping them answer those four big questions of what are we doing? What should I be doing? How do I know I'm doing it? An additional component to those classroom-wide visual supports is the physical arrangements in the classroom. So this includes clearly defined areas such as centers, large group, and so on, having visuals of where children sit in large group, whether it's a circle, whether it's stacked. I know some of this has changed with COVID, but any kind of visual supports for where should I be when we're having large group time. And then this is something I hadn't learned until I joined the Pele Center, but utilizing furniture to create these natural barriers within the classroom to really, well, for one, limiting runways, because you don't want children running in circles like a racetrack, because that's not going to help anyone, and making sure that there's no unobstructed open space to engage in some of what we would call challenging behavior. But shelves are a great way to break these areas up, and instead of having them against the wall, having them set clear defined boundaries for centers. And then also within those shelves, you can have pictures of what toys go where to help during cleanup time, and then covering the shelves as well during instruction time, so there's less distraction. Or if a certain center isn't open that day that you don't want children to be playing in, if it's covered, then that's a visual reminder, oh, I'm not supposed to be here. So some of those antecedent strategies catch them before they can engage in any of this challenging behavior are really great ways to incorporate into classroom-wide visuals. And next we'll go into activity-specific. So second, we have these activity-specific visuals, which are that next level to consider. So the sign-in routine, as Ted was starting to allude to earlier, is a favorite of our team in terms of welcoming children into the classroom. And one way to do this is to have an easel for them to write their name, and then specific tracing or models can be provided for individual children depending on where they're at in learning how to write their name. And that it's illustrated here on the right, and then having pictures you see down below of where to go next. So in this one, we have finding a peer buddy. Again, COVID might have changed, but how much children can interact, which is unfortunate, but it could be, going to a table assignment, going to wash hands, and so on, to allow them to enter into the classroom, have something they're doing, they're working on their writing skills right off the bat, and then they know where to go next. And then visual supports within some activities as well, as seen on the left. A common one that most preschool classrooms that I've been in at least have, but badges or visual cues of where we are in centers so that they know if a center is full, how many students can be there, and allows them to navigate between those choices. And then another step that leads us into that next one is how to complete a particular activity or supports to complete an activity with some visuals as a reminder. So that last piece will be routines to the third level visuals. So these bring all of the components that I've just covered into an activity that's engaging and provides ample opportunities for students to interact with each other. So these visual supports shown here have children choose a center, which is going to be make-believe or grocery center, and then assign the play roles within that center. So one child is a cashier, one child is a shopper. Depending on the size of your classroom, there could be multiple shoppers. And then 3 on either sides, the left and the right, we have ideas of what to do within that role and examples to encourage play. So the shopper can write a shopping list, the cashier can bag the grocery items, the shopper can pay, the cashier can, check them out, write a receipt, or hand, transact some, money. And so this is a personal favorite of mine that I just love how it builds on children's independence and promotes the use of those social skills within the activity with very little adult mediation in the moment because it's already created for them. There are already these scripts and these suggestions, for both children, who can read, but with the visual supports, even if they're not able to read, depending on the level of your students. And then, as you might guess, this promotes engagement and the kids are able to navigate independently into centers and play together without needing someone guiding them. So it's really fun to watch in real time. This is one that I've gotten to have the privilege to see in person in one of our LEAP classrooms, and the kids love it. And it's one of those just a little bit of prompting along the way, and they take off. And so now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Abby, and she's going to bring us home with our last few sections.
Okay, we can go ahead and advance, Ted. All right, so up to this point, we have considered the setup of our environment in the classroom. So we have ensured now that it's balanced, that it's consistent, and that it's predictable. And we've also considered some of the teaching tools we might use, as Ellie just highlighted, these different visuals that we can incorporate in the routines within the routines within the routines. And so finally, we have the final part of this chain, and that is providing consequences that will increase the likelihood that children engage in these routines that we've so thoughtfully planned out. And we've so thoughtfully supported them in following by incorporating these visuals. So how do we do that? How do we get them to kind of abide by these routines and, build upon their independence? We catch them in the act of being good. That's a fun little catchphrase, catch them in the act of being good. We want to draw attention to those children in the classroom who have followed the steps in the routine. We've done the work by establishing the expectations, and now it's time to provide that enthusiastic, genuine, descriptive feedback when those expectations are followed. And so we really encourage just getting as creative as possible with this, pairing it with some sort of behavior management system, whether that be a group contingency. So marbles in a jar is a great one. Kids can visually see that, when I come in and I do the morning routine and I end up at circle, like I'm seeing my teacher, she's telling me I did a good job and she's putting those marbles in the jar. And as it fills up, there's some type of class-wide reinforcer, such as a big dance party or something like that. So they're really motivated by seeing those, and they can hear too. So they can not only see it, they can hear it. The marbles are filling up into the jar. That's a great one. Another one is B bands. And so there's a classroom we know of that has 3 Bs or 3 expectations, to be safe, to be friendly, and to be a worker. And so when the adults in the room notice children engaging in those expectations, they are provided with a little bracelet as a reminder that they followed those expectations that day. They followed the 3 Bs that they affectionately call it. The bottom line here is to provide descriptive feedback and acknowledge efforts of children in the classroom when they're engaging in when they are engaged and when they are kind of following the routine that we've set up for them. Next slide. Got to keep Ted on his toes over there. And then finally, we'd be remiss to not include families in any discussion around supporting children in their classroom and their engagement. because we know that, you know, these collaborative efforts across home and school just continue to multiply the opportunities for children to learn. And so there are several home-based routines that do increase those opportunities for independence, for communication, and for pro-social behaviors even further. And it facilitates that generalization as well. When what we're doing at home looks similar to what we're doing at school, we're better, we're more engaged. There's less, if we're more engaged, as Ted said, we have less opportunity or less chances to engage in challenging behavior, because you can't be doing challenging behavior when you're engaged and you're following those routines. We want our recommendations for families to be easy and efficient. So we haven't gone into much detail on this slide by design, primarily because you must consider the unique needs for each individual family, as well as their existing routines. And so what I recommend to one family may not be the same as what I recommend to another. Just as we meet children where they're at, we want to meet families where they're at. We don't want to throw them a billion strategies. We want them to feel successful with a couple, you know, we want to find the areas where the problems occur, recommend a few strategies around that, have them feeling successful, and we can build upon that as needed. So similar to the classroom, schedules can be a very effective strategy for increasing independence at home. We can also use schedules to teach new skills and decrease challenging behaviors. As in when they know what to expect, and this is for both parents and children. When parents and children have those predictable routines, it makes their days easier to navigate. They have more time to problem solve around the tricky stuff when they know kind of what to expect. We can also offer suggestions on where to incorporate different goals, such as communication. So during routines such as meal or snack time, we can kind of build upon the mean length utterance of language. So kind of adding in those more descriptive words. We can also sabotage the routine in a way by kind of by not providing everything they need and having that opportunity embedded for the child to ask for what they need to complete the routine, whether it be a spoon for yogurt or scissors to cut out a heart at a table activity, those types of things. And then finally, providing support if challenging behavior is occurring in the home. And so problem solving different antecedent strategies for the challenging behavior, such as providing choices, using some of those visual supports, and even embedding preferences into non-preferred activities can all be really good options used in conjunction with removing or withholding reinforcement for challenging behavior, and then applying it instead to the use of the replacement behavior that we're teaching by using those choice strategies, visuals, embedding their interests into the activities, those types of things. And that's that two-pronged approach, the last component on that slide. And so again, you know, there's a lot of things that we know about how to make children successful, but it's when we partner with families, we want to consider not dumping all the strategies, but, you know, helping them to identify where they're experiencing problems at home and fine-tuning the strategies to those particular areas, just so they don't get overwhelmed. All right, I think that wraps us up.
So I just wanted to thank you, Abby and Ellie. That was great. Just wanted to refer everybody to some references. And Abby, as you were talking, I realized that I definitely should have included links to the Pyramid Model Backpack series and the Home Connections work that we have done through the Pyramid Model, because there are specific backpack series handouts for families related to developing schedules and routines in the home setting. And I completely spaced on that, and I apologize to all of you for doing that. But the resources that we do have on here are one, just a great online resource, free resource for some basic classroom visuals that you can use to develop schedules and routines in your classroom, and those are through the Head Start Inclusion Center. And then we have a couple of examples of classrooms using these kinds of routines and routines within routines within routines. So these are from our Vimeo page. One is a classroom using a daily schedule. And we also have an example of an individual child using individual supports around a visual schedule. And it looks like, judging by the links, I put the same video link in for both of them. So anyways, if you go to our Vimeo page, there are lots of classroom examples of classrooms using schedules and routines in a consistent way with visual supports embedded and incorporated into them. So I think the next thing, we do have our email addresses here. If anybody would like to reach out to us with questions, we always welcome that. We love to hear about what you guys are doing in your classrooms, how you're utilizing these strategies, and we're always willing to help by answering questions and troubleshooting with you as well. So with that, I think we are going to open it up, pass it back to Dan for questions.
Yes, excellent. Well, thank you, Ted, Ellie, and Abby. It's a fantastic presentation. So we have been getting a bunch of questions in. And also to the audience, I will be sending out those links that Ted shared in your follow-up email tomorrow. So no worries if you didn't get a chance to jot those down, you'll be getting them in an email tomorrow. All right, so let's see. We had a couple listeners who were asking if would you recommend using schedules and routines as much as possible in the classroom? So trying to define, just about every aspect of the classroom's day into a routine or schedule.
So that's a really good question. And I think one of the misconceptions is that when you develop all of these really consistent and systematic routines within routines within routines, that's going to take away from children's opportunity to engage in child choice, child-directed play. And that is absolutely not the case. We strongly suggest large chunks of the day where kids are engaged in child-directed, child choice play. But what we do within that is help them understand what those routines are. So if it's your child-directed center time, kids have to choose a center. They have to go and participate in that center. Maybe they change centers. So what's the routine that they engage in around choosing a center, getting to that center, and potentially changing that center, right? And then within those centers, as Ellie shared, we can provide visuals and supports to help them understand what to do in that center. So we know, obviously, many of our children naturally engage with materials and learn how to use them through trial and error, and they have blossoming imaginations to help them with pretend play. But we also have a population of children that may not have those skills, or those skills are really just emerging. And so we layer in these supports to help a child understand, using the grocery store dramatic play example is a great one. What do you do when you go to the grocery store? Okay, you take a basket, you have a shopping list, you go and you pick out your food, then you go to the checkout area and they ring you up, and that person, then maybe somebody bags the groceries, right? So it helps them, these kind of play scripts help kids learn what these routines are, some of which lead to development of routines that we'll use our whole life, like going to the grocery store, and some of them may be more specific to a play activity where you're doing an art project, and that art project has multiple steps. The kids need to color something and then cut it out and then glue pieces together. And so we would represent what that routine is within that project so that they had visual examples and they had a reference of what to do within that area. Does that mean that their art project is going to come out looking like Ellie's art project and Abby's art project and my art project? Absolutely not, because we're all going to interpret those things differently and be very as independent as possible with those tasks.
Mm-hmm.
So an excellent question, and I do think that that is something that people kind of misunderstand. Just because we're structuring our day around these predictable routines, that does not take away from children's independence in the classroom or their opportunities to engage in child choice activities.
Great, thank you, Ted. Let's see, we have another viewer who is asking about what are your thoughts on phasing out visuals in the classroom? They're saying, would you use visuals all year long, but maybe not teach them once the class as a whole is able to follow the routine? Or would you keep those visuals in place and continue to use them as part of the routines initiative?
Ellie or Abby, either of you want to take this? I'm happy to.
I can take it. I think they answered their own question, or maybe Dan, you answered it for them. I think that you keep the visuals in, right? And I think the first couple weeks, again, we're meeting children where they're at. So whether it's the first couple weeks, by the end of the first month, based on the use of those visuals, we're not doing as much teaching or the physical guidance or the prompting anymore. They're kind of doing it on their own, and it looks like a well-oiled machine, right? So I would strongly discourage from removing any, but yet it's those teaching moments. It's that you being more so involved that you're fading out. I think that those visuals just provide that structure, that predictability. Let's say that they were gone for a week because their family took a trip and then they came back. You know, those visuals being gone is going to probably cause more problem behavior than if we just left them in. And so, you know, Ted, you can piggyback off that, but I think, you know, I would recommend you keep them in and just, you know, but it becomes that well-oiled machine where they're doing it on their own, and teachers can kind of stand back and use their time in other areas rather than guide them through the routine.
Yeah, I'll add two things. One is, it's kind of the nature of early childhood and early childhood special education that the cohort of kids, the classroom that we have in September isn't always the classroom we have in May, right? We have kids that leave, we have kids that come in October, in January, in March, sometimes in April, right? And so if okay, our kids know these routines now, if we take away those visuals, what happens when that new student comes in? Second thing is I like to draw the analogy to road signs, right? You may know where you're going, and if we removed all the road signs, it wouldn't matter, but then what if you have to go somewhere new? Are you going to know how to get there? Well, we're constantly introducing new activities and new materials and new songs, new play activities into our classroom day. So it's smart to make sure that those visuals are consistent throughout the year, because they may not need them every day, they may not use them every day, but every now and then, hey, we all have a bad day, and having a visual cue of reminding me of what the expectation is or what I'm supposed to be doing can be a really valuable tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see. We have another viewer who is asking about, so related to the positive reinforcement, they're wondering if you would suggest using something such as a caught being good ribbon or something physical that you can give to the child as a reward for, you know, good behavior.
Yeah, anything tangible, tacking on to things that are visual, those are all really great things. But would say that with that, there needs to be some of that verbal praise as well. That's something that we want children to be able to eventually be able to, cooperate and follow instructions simply based on not based on verbal praise, but with simply verbal praise as the reinforcement. But until we get there, those tangible components, and also then for other students in the classroom to see, oh, he has a really cool ribbon. I want that ribbon. And this is how I'm going to get that ribbon, is a great way, kind of behavior contagion, to bring the whole classroom up. And something that Ted said at some point that has always stuck with me is intrinsic motivation is great for those who have it, but not all children have it. And particularly when we're talking about children who might have a developmental delay or some challenging behavior or executive functioning difficulties, anything that we can do to support them getting there and building some of that intrinsic motivation is vital for them being able to succeed in the classroom. And so, the fun part is it can be, caught being good or a superstar. They can be collecting, links for a caterpillar chain to hang up in the classroom. Anything fun that, can be fed into the current kind of theme of the, week or the month or whatever your curriculum has. But just always pairing that tangible with that verbal praise. And, one more note with that, with the verbal praise, is that we do always recommend, not just good job, but good job for X, Y, and Z, and really describing what it is that helped them earn that, so that they're more easily able to copy that and do it again in the future. As descriptive as possible is what we always recommend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's one,
Go ahead.
Okay, there's one additional thing that I wanted to add, written in my notes here, and I skipped over it somehow, but with adults in the classroom, we want this praise, this reinforcement system, to be both systematic and consistent. So it doesn't, and that's for adults providing it and also children receiving it, right? So we're not only acknowledging perfect performance, we're acknowledging the effort towards that attainment of the ideal performance, right? Because again, we're meeting kids where they're at. And so really being systematic, consistent, equitable across the ways in which we provide reinforcement. And then Ted, I'll let you add on as well.
Yeah, I was going to say very much the same thing, and that is anytime we're discussing reinforcement or systems of reinforcement, the two potentially most important things to remember are, one, reinforcement systems need to be individualized. So whatever you're doing, it has to be something that's meaningful for that particular child. And then the second thing is, as Abby just said, we need to make sure we are not just reinforcing excellence or completion, but we're also reinforcing effort, because that's how we get to completion or to excellence. It's through that systematic reinforcement of trying, of effort, of working hard, right? Even if they're not necessarily doing it right or doing it perfectly, it's very important to reinforce that effort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, we had a listener ask about if a child, is having trouble reaching that level of, they're making the effort, but they can't quite reach that level, would you reward that behavior? And I think, the answer is yes, to reward them along the way as they're working towards reaching that. Let's see. We had a couple listeners who were asking about working with their colleagues. And so they're working, say, with a teacher that has a classroom routine in place, but they're not necessarily referring to it frequently. So would you have any suggestions or tips for working with that colleague to encourage them to refer more to their routines to help support the students?
I think one of the strategies that I utilize when I'm coaching with classrooms is I think about an individual kid, and I ask questions about, do you think that child understands what's happening now? Our boss, our fearless leader, Phil Strain, once went into another colleague of ours' classroom, and he said something along the lines of, if I can't figure out what you're supposed to be doing in your classroom right now, what makes you think the kids are going to know? So if that teacher is not explicitly going over that schedule and reviewing it and being explicit about what the kids are supposed to be doing, they're not going to know. And so really just trying to think about it in terms of, we've got to remember all of our kids and all of our kids' needs. And that schedule is not there for us. We know what the schedule is. If I asked a teacher to write down your daily schedule for me, they're going to be able to write down their daily schedule for me, right? This isn't there for them. This is there to support the learners in their classroom. And so bringing it back to, do you think a child knows and understands what they're doing now, how they know they're making progress, how they know when they're finished and what's coming next, is a good way to try to kind of bring people on board with this idea. So those 4 questions are really important. Just again, what am I supposed to be doing right now? How do I know I'm making progress? How do I know when I'm finished? And what comes next?
Great, thanks, Ted. Let's see. We're getting close to 3 p.m., so I think we have time for one more question. Oops, I just saw, there it is. So we have a listener who's asking, I guess, kind of like, stepping out of a routine. So say a special event is coming up, such as a field trip or a visit from the librarian. Would you add that to the schedule a few days in advance? How would you go about discussing that out of the ordinary event that is coming up?
Sure, definitely prime them for it, right? Give them that advance notice, that rehearsal. I oftentimes bring up the example of, like, for a little toddler, you wouldn't say you're going to get a shot like 2 minutes before they're going to get a shot. You're going to get a meltdown, right? And so definitely priming them for it. And also, like, you can make these schedules fun. You can put, like, you can have an icon or something, or a star or something. It's like the mystery activity that's going to happen. And don't incorporate those just the 2 days before the really odd event, like the really out there thing that they've never done before, but do it regularly, right? We don't want to teach rigidity to the schedule either. We want them to be okay with those changes, with that and we want them to have that flexibility. And so I think incorporating that change, not only for those events, but as much as you can, and having them have those opportunities to practice, like, no, we're not going outside for recess today, but that's okay. Anything either of you guys would want to add to my colleagues?
I think just that, the nature of preschool classrooms is that we do have things unexpected coming up pretty frequently, or a new teacher or a substitute, or drill, fire drills, or unfortunate lockdown drills, those kinds of things. And so exactly what Abby was saying, of not, kind of enabling some rigidity with the schedule, but allowing for, just kind of testing the waters a little bit, maybe have story time before centers one day when normally it's the reverse, and that kind of thing, and just helping them to practice, okay, yes, this changed, but I still know what I'm supposed to be doing in those activities. And, and then when it is something, big of a change, bringing some, reinforcements along with that of, this is how we're going to operate when we're there. This is how we're going to get on the bus, or this is how we're going to transition in there. And then this is what we're going to do when we get back. And this is when we will be getting back. And, any of those supports that, can help children along the way, because that is, part of life of being able to adapt, but it's also something that can be really difficult for some of the kiddos that we're working with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. The last thing that I would add, just specifically to that question, is, if you do calendar as an activity in your classroom, you could put a star on that day. So as you're getting closer to it, you're starting to count down and talking about what that event is going to be. And then at the end of the day prior, as you've gone through the end of your schedule and you're taking that last thing off and it's time for goodbye, saying to the kids, okay, remember tomorrow our schedule is going to be a little different. And then when they come in the day of that event, having that schedule set to represent what that change is going to be is really important. So whatever that change is, have it represented in that schedule and make that part of that arrival routine, that it's there, it's up, kids can reference it. And we've seen repeatedly over and over with kids, they will go over to that schedule, they will look at it, they will check out what's happening today as part of their arrival into the classroom. So it becomes not so much that they rigidly have to adhere to the same thing every day, but they use it as a tool to help them understand what's going to be happening over the course of that day.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you, Abby, Ellie, and Ted for fielding those questions, and thank you for submitting them, everyone. So I think that would be all the time we have for questions. So I do have a few more things to wrap up with. So certificates of attendance are available. You can download those from the handout section now. They're available there for download. You can go to the URL bpub.fyi/upm-routines-cert, or you will receive your follow-up email tomorrow that will have a link for you to download a certificate there. Then you will also be prompted at the close of this webinar to complete a short survey. If you just let us know what you thought about this survey and any ideas that you have for future coffee chat topics, you'll be entered to win a free copy of Unpacking the Pyramid Model. And we are extending a discount offer to all coffee chat attendees. So you can save 20% at brookspublishing.com using the code coffee121. And you can also save 20% off of Unpacking the Pyramid Model if you are interested in purchasing the book. And then if you're looking for additional coffee chats, we have tons of recorded webinars, and we also have about 12 more coffee chats coming up in the spring. So if you're looking for additional coffee chat opportunities, you can go to bpub.fyi/coffee chats. And this is also the first of 4 Unpacking the Pyramid Model chapter author webinars that we have. So we have 3 more coming up on other chapters from Unpacking the Pyramid Model. And last but not least, we have quite a bit of COVID-19 resources that we've compiled to help early childhood professionals, educators, work with young children during this really challenging time. So we have recommended reading, downloadable resources, and other professional development webinars that are available there. And you can find those at bpub.fyi/COVID-EC. And again, you'll receive a follow-up email tomorrow that will have all this information in it, as well as a link to the recording so that you can watch the recording, share it with colleagues. So with that, I'd like to just say thank you to Ted, Ellie, and Abby for presenting this terrific webinar. And thank you to all of our attendees for joining us. All right, so have a good rest of your day, everyone.